Hi there, it's V with Crafting Daily Dose, and today I have a really fun card for you from the August 2021 paper pumpkin called Hope Box. This card has lots of layers and textures and dimension on the front, and when you open it up, there's even more dimension and some motion as well. I'm so excited to show you how to make this card, and the best part is that with the exception of some of the adhesives, everything came from the kit. Now I did use 2 card bases for this, but only because I wanted to add this extra layer behind the butterfly die cuts. If you don't want to do that, you can skip that, and you can do just as well without it. I'm going to be using part of this card base from the kit, but if you've seen my other video, you'll know that I've already used up the corresponding die cut that's supposed to layer over it. But that's okay because I have other die cuts that I can use to layer on top of here and take advantage of these pretty bursts of color. I'm going to put some glue in the center of these die cuts, and especially for the butterflies, I'm going to leave the edges free just in case I decide to curl up the wings a little bit for some more dimension. If I don't use all of these pieces for this project, then I can save them to put on another card. Now, of course, you can just use the die cuts as is and skip this extra step, but I wanted to incorporate some of these spots of color to add even more brightness to the card. Once the glue has set, I can use my snips to fussy cut around the images. First, I do a very rough cut and then come in for more details. You can see that I'm moving the paper more so than my scissors. And then finally, for the angles that are very tight, I'll come in from different directions so that I get a closer cut. And then I'll continue like this for the other images. These are the die cuts that I will be using. These 2 butterflies and flowers are part of the elements that are meant to decorate the box if you chose to do that. And then I've got one of these little purple butterflies as well. I'll be using the large butterfly die cut for my card rather than decorating the box with it. I'm using this card base and this decorated panel. I've got the Hope die cut. And this is one of the kits that has some bonus pieces in French and German since it's going to be sold internationally, but I know that I won't need the French one, so I'm just going to turn this over and stamp on it so that I can use this as a banner. And I'll also be using about 10 inches of the ribbon. Here's that French banner, and I'm going to stamp on the back of it. I'm using the foam mat from my Stamparatus for a little bit of extra cushion, which I like to do when I'm using clear photopolymer stamps. I want the sentiment just a note of hope, but I'm going to use the die cut for the word hope. So I want to stamp just A, and then separately I want to stamp note of. So I'll do some masking. I'm using washi tape for this, but you can also use a Post-it or other sticky note. And I'm basically covering everything except that first line of text. There's a little bit here that jets up, so I've got a tiny piece of tape there that I'm going to use just to cover that up. And press that down well, and then I'm going to go ahead and ink it up so that only the words "Just A" are going to get ink on them. And this is the Blackberry Bliss ink from the kit. So here's this. You can see that I've got extra ink that went onto the washi tape, so now I'm going to peel this off. And double check, I don't see any ink on words that I don't want, so then I'll stamp this down on my banner. I've cleaned off my stamp thoroughly, and I can also just stamp on some scrap paper just to check and make sure that I don't have any residual ink so that it's not a surprise. And now I'm going to mask off the top and the bottom lines so that I can get just the middle line of text. I can even reuse some of that washi. Now remember to peel that tape back off. And there you go. Since I cut up this card base, I'm going to get the most out of it that I can. So I'm going to use the other side to cut the strip that I need for my mechanism. So I'm putting it under my trimmer and cutting it at 1 inch. This is my scoring blade, so that's moved out of the way. And then I'm going to go ahead and cut 1 inch. Now I'm going to cut down this 1 inch strip into the pieces that I need. So I'm using the measurements that are on the right hand side because for these small measurements it's easier to do so that you have more to hold on to on this side. And I'm going to put this at 1/4 of an inch. Now we're going to be alternating between scoring and cutting, so you really have to pay attention to what color blade that you're using if you're using this trimmer. So the lighter blade is for scoring and the darker one is for cutting. I've put this at 1/4 inch, and then I'm going to go ahead and score. Then I'm going to move to 1/2 inch and now cut. So here's my piece. It's just easier to cut these smaller pieces when you've got a larger piece to work from. I'll do that one more time. So score at 1/4 inch, cut at 1/2 inch. So that's it. These two little rectangles here represent our mechanism. Now, if you hadn't used that card base to be able to cut it up now, any piece of scrap cardstock will do. You really need so little of it. Take the Melon Mambo card base and fold it down the middle along that score line that's already there. And make sure you reinforce that fold. Now I'm going to put in these two little rectangles, and I'm going to finish prepping them first. So I'm taking my snips and I'm going to cut about halfway up along the score line. It doesn't have to be exactly half, so don't stress about that. I'm just going to eyeball it. And there, that's about half. Now I'm going to come back in with my snips again, and I'm going to cut another line right parallel to that, just a thin margin in between. See how it created this little sliver? I'm just going to cut that out. You don't necessarily have to do the second cut, but I find that if you have a little gap here, so it's more of a narrow slot rather than a slit, the movement is going to be a little bit smoother. So this is what we have. We're going to do the same thing with the other piece. So here's my score line. I'm going to estimate and go about halfway, and then I'm going to go just to the side of that, cut off the thinnest little sliver of paper, like that, and then just go ahead and separate that. Now for both of these pieces, we're going to work that fold really well. So I'm going to do it first as a mountain fold, and reinforce that, and then I will go back and fold it the other way. So now it's a valley fold. Go ahead and reinforce that. Do the same thing on the other side. Okay, so now we have these two pieces that are more or less the same. We're going to turn one of them upside down, and then we're going to fit those two pieces into each other. So on this one, I've got the bottom parts here, the little flaps down here, and on this one, they're pointing up instead. And I'm going to slide these in like that. And so let me show you from the top. It's a little X shape. So that's what we're going to be recreating, and that is what forms the movement. So it's this X shape that basically opens up and then collapses back, opens up and collapses back. So pick one of the sides, it doesn't really matter which one. I'm going to go with this one. And I'm going to go ahead and put glue on just one half. And again, it doesn't really matter which half that you use. So on mine, I put it here. This is going to be what supports the body of the butterfly. So wherever you want your butterfly to land, wherever you want your butterfly to be, that's where that flap should go. So for me, I want it a little bit on the higher end, not exactly centered here, because I want to leave myself a little bit more room in this corner to write my message. So I think I want my butterfly right about here. I realized after the fact that I forgot to check the position of the top of the wing. I'll fix this later, but don't make the same mistake that I did. Check to make sure that your butterfly is going to fit inside the card before you go on. The rest of the steps are the same though. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and fold my piece in half so I can see where that crease is, and I'm going to put it right next to the crease on the card. And because the glue was behind the right side of my mechanism, it's going to attach to the right side of my card. Let me give you a closer view of what we have. Here's my piece. The side that is on the right is glued down, and the side that's on the left is free. And my flap is towards the top part of my mechanism. So on my other piece, I want my flaps to be towards the bottom, and this time instead of putting glue on the right hand side, I'm going to put glue on the left hand side. So I'm bending this over, and now the left side is on top, and that's the part I'm going to put glue on. Now I showed you before how these two pieces slide into one another, because we're going to do the same thing, except now one of them happens to be attached to the card. but it's the same mechanism. We're going to slide that in. And then the glue is on this left-hand side. I'm going to close down my card onto the exposed glue, and I'm going to give that a chance to set up. Once it does, then I can open my card, and you can already begin to see that movement. Okay, so the card base is ready to go. I'm bringing in my trimmer. Now I have that large butterfly die cut, and I'm going to cut this in half. So I'm lining up the space in between the antennae, and I'm putting it along the track of my trimmer. And then I'm lining the bottom part of the body, and I'm putting that along the track too. So now my butterfly is centered. I'm going to close this down. Just double check. Check twice, cut once, holding it firmly, and then take a deep breath, go ahead and cut. All right, there you go. Now our butterfly is going to go onto the mechanism. So let's just do one side at a time. I'm going to go ahead and put some glue on this right-hand side. And then I'm going to position my butterfly so that the top part of its body is going to go right over that piece. I misjudged a little bit when I glued down that first piece, so it's a little bit high if I put my body directly over the piece like I wanted to. The top of my wing would show when the card is closed, and I don't want that. So I'm just scooching the butterfly down a little bit, and if any of that mechanism shows, I'll just trim it off with my snips. Now I'm going to test it, close it, and then open. Close and open. Okay, now we're ready for glue on the other side. And I'm putting that piece on top of my mechanism, but I'm also trying to line it up with the piece that's already there so that I don't have one side higher than the other. I'm checking to make sure that everything fits and that the tip of the wing does not go past the top edge of the card. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and close it, and I want to make sure that this fold is reinforced again. There's going to be a little bit of bulk right there, so we're just smoothing that down a little bit. And then let's see. There you go. All right. I'll show you a little bit closer. Since I had put my mechanism just a little bit too high, I can see some of the rectangle behind where my butterfly is. Now it's the same kind of white as our card base, and so unless you're really looking for it, you might not notice, but I am going to go back in with my snips and trim that off. Now for pop-up and interactive cards, I always like to start with the mechanism and make sure everything goes smoothly before I decorate the rest of the card. That way, for example, I don't invest in doing the front until that I know that this is going to be okay, just in case something catastrophic happens and I have to start over. I'm going to put this panel on using my Stampin' Seal. I've got some tear and tape and I'm going to put it along this panel so that I can use it for my ribbon. This ribbon is a loose weave, which makes it nice and flexible and not too bulky, but it also means that it tends to fray. Now you can treat the edges to prevent the fraying, but rather than fighting it, I figured I would just go with it. So I pulled this strand right here, the one that goes across, and I just pulled on it until it frayed some more to create this nice fringe. Now I'm going to peel off the backing from my tear and tape, and I'm going to lay my ribbon down on top of it. And I'll just make a few little pleats. Again, it's nice and pliable, so even with the pleats, it's not actually all that bulky. Okay, so maybe end it here to kind of make it match the other side. And I'm going to find my strand here. Here we are. Find the right one so that I can pull on it and make fringe on this side as well. Now my banner is going to go on top of that, and I want this die cut here, maybe a little bit offset. So I'm going to go ahead and glue the word hope to the banner first so that I can judge to see how long I need to cut it. Once I decide where to trim the banner, I can go ahead and put tear and tape on the back of it. Time to put on the rest of the die cuts. For these butterflies, I'm just curling the edge of the wings up a little bit so that there's a little bit more dimension, and I'm going to glue them on. So that's our completed card. It's fun on the outside and even more fun on the inside. I hope that you've enjoyed this dose of creativity. If you're interested in Paper Pumpkin but don't have a demonstrator yet, I would love for you to subscribe with me, and you can find that link in the description box below. I hope that you'll join me the next time, and until then, have a great day.